Good morning. Paul says in Corinthians, he says, one sows and one plants, one waters, but God gives the increase. Neither is he that planted anything, nor he that waters, but God who gives the increase. And this is Paul writing to the Corinthians church, and he is writing to them because of their strife and their divisions and their competitiveness. And he's saying, it's actually God who gives the increase, because these are farming illustrations, of course. The farmer sows, plants, and then another waters, but it is actually God the increase. You cannot make wheat to grow. You cannot make rice grow. You have this little grain of wheat, you have this little grain of rice, and then it disintegrates in the ground, and then it comes up and shoots up a whole shaft. Nothing like, it's a miraculous, completely, this little tiny thing comes into this massive thing as it mixes with the soil and the nutrients and the water and the sunshine and all what goes into those things. It is miraculous. God gives the increase. And this idea, it's the same in our personal life. We want to grow. We want to grow in our faith. Peter says, grow in the grace and knowledge of God. And we want to grow in that, but we can't do it by striving. Consider the lilies of the field. Consider that they do not toil nor spin, yet they are, graced in this elegant beauty and simplicity about them. And God did that. And one of the things about farming is that you cannot make anything to grow, but you can create the conditions for it to grow. And that's what we can do in the Christian life. We can create the conditions. We can put ourselves in the place where God will give us the increase. And it's not that, because we can get into a place where we say, well, I can't make myself to grow. I can't do it by my own willpower. In fact, if I try by my own willpower, I am sure to fail. This was Paul's struggle in Romans chapter 7. It's the things that I want to do, I do not do them. The things I don't want to do, I do them. And it frustrates him. His own willpower is unable to make himself to grow. That toiling and that spinning, it doesn't work. But he finds that there is another way. So it's not our willpower, but then we can't, of course, go into the other side of it, idleness and passivity or laziness or anything, because this also doesn't work. So there's another, in Mark 4, Jesus tells the little parable similar. He says, a farmer sows the seed into the ground, and then he goes to bed and sleeps day and night. And it says, the earth yields the increase of itself. He does not know how. The earth by itself causes the increase of the wheat to happen by itself. He doesn't know how. And it makes the point of saying he goes to sleep. And then it says, as soon as the harvest has come, it grows first the blade, then the ear, and then the full head of corn. It grows progressively. And then as soon as it's fully ripe, he is to come and cut the harvest down. So there's 2 points where you see the farmer involved. He plows the field, he sows the seed. But then it grows by itself, he does not know how. This is God giving the increase. But then at the harvest time, the farmer is back again. It's his work again. He must cut the crop down. But the point is that we are co-laborers together with God, which is what Paul says, as well as Corinthians. This co-laboring. There's an old book by Richard Foster called Celebration of Discipline. Actually, it's not that old. It's relatively new in one sense. I think it was written in 1978. But for what they consider Christian classic, it is relatively new. And he has his book. It's called Celebration of Discipline. There it is. Old book. I had read it way back, and I got reminded of it recently, and I thought I'd read it again. And the principles are good. But basically, he's saying, and it's a nice mixture, the combination of words, discipline and celebration. He was going to call the book The Freedom of Discipline. They're kind of words that don't seem to go together, celebration and discipline. But he says, there are certain Christian disciplines, like in farming, you cannot make yourself to grow. And if you try to do it, it's not going to work. You just have to create the conditions, and then God makes us to grow. But even the disciplines, and he gives a few. The first one, meditation, prayer, fasting, study. These are inward disciplines, and then outward, simplicity, solitude, submission, service, and then corporate confession, worship, guidance, celebration. So these are, it's useful. It's a practical book like that. But what he makes the point in it in saying is that they're useless of themselves. None of them can make you grow. None of them give you anything. These are the very things that the Pharisees got into, all sorts of disciplines. But it wasn't God that was given the increase. And it wasn't even they were seeking for God to give the increase, but that they were doing it. But the point in this book is that if we do, there's no room for God to cause it to grow. There's a part that God has to make us grow, and there's a part that we have to just create the conditions and put ourselves in an environment of where we can be in a place where God can give the increase, that there is some margin in our life, there is some room in our life in it. And just maybe we'll finish with this, like George Mueller, who started those orphanages in Bristol, and I think over the years he had 4,000 children, and today's money over $100 million in people giving money, never asked for anything, never told the needs, and yet every need was met: food, clothing, education, all the things that they need, the cost of the land, the buildings, and these things. But he never asked for anything. But he was a pastor. They had this church, him and this other brother were running a church, and it grew. They had around 600 people. But he found that the people were suffering spiritually, and they would do some house visits. And one of the things they noted, a lot of them were working miners and working people in laboring like 12, 14 hours a day, 6-7 days a week. And they'd come home at night, and they were believers, and they would open their Bible and kneel down to pray and just fall asleep. And no concentration, no energy left, no time. And he urged them to say, you've got to cut your hours down in your work to a reasonable level and give time for your soul. And they were saying, no, I've got to provide for my family. And he was saying, you trust God. You give your time to that. You trust God, God will provide. But they didn't. So he started the orphanages, he says, not for the spiritual welfare of the children, not for the physical welfare of the children, but as a witness to the people in the church to show, and now the church at large and really worldwide over, now we're talking, generations later, that if you trust God, God will provide your needs. If you put your trust in God, allow Him to do it, and He'll provide that means. So that he was saying to those men, you give extra time to God, and even though it means cutting down your works, God will provide everything you need for your family, and you'll have a healthy soul, because you're giving no time to your soul. Not only will your soul be healthy, but you will then be able to nourish the souls of your family. So that was George Mueller's. He really learned that idea that you've got to create the conditions for God. So whether it is overworking in our secular work, overworking in our Christian work, and we are giving no room for God. No, we are not creating the conditions for God to give the increase. That's it really. Amen. Amen.